welcome to A Bit of Everything. I'm Henry H. Bomb Higgins, flying solo today because my son Josh, J-Rock, is feeling a bit unwell. He's a bit under the weather, so we were going to do this video together, but I'm flying solo. Now, back in April of 2014, I wrote an article for cultofwhatever.com. It was then known as Talk Wrestling Online, and there will be a link in the description below to that article, where we were heading into WrestleMania 30 in New Orleans, and the article chronicled one forgotten undercard match from each WrestleMania that either exceeded all expectations or helped push a wrestler onto greater things, but the match itself had been lost in time due to more higher profile bouts at each show. Now, today we're doing a video looking back at NXT Takeover events as we steamroll ahead towards NXT Takeover New York, which has been held at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn at WrestleMania weekend, which does make it odd that it's not being called Takeover Brooklyn 5. But that's a story for another day though, as we are looking at what we believe are the best undercard matches from each card, starting with the first event, which was simply called NXT Takeover, because they were taking over the network, that's where it came from, all the way through to NXT Takeover Phoenix in January just gone. Now, the rules are that there is obviously only one match per show, per card. That best is subjective, so it's taken into various accounts, including impact on the night and what it meant for that character going forward or the promotion going forward, and it cannot be the bout that closed the show. So again, we're focusing on the undercard matches. And a special disclaimer, NXT Arrival doesn't count as it was not officially a takeover event. It was the first network special, but it predates the network in the same way that the Wrestling Classic predates the pay-per-view era. So, here we go, running through the takeovers chronologically from the first to the most recent.
NXT Takeover.
First up, we have NXT Takeover, the original event, which took place at Full Sail, as the majority of the NXT shows did back then, 29th of May 2014, and for us, the undercard match, the best match of the undercard there was Tyler Breeze versus Sami Zayn, and the number one contenders match for the NXT Championship. Now, the reason that match is great is that it was 16 minutes of awesome in-ring action, two diametric opposites as it relates to character, but two great in-ring talents with a point to prove at that point in their NXT runs. Back and forth action, near falls aplenty, and a surprising winner in Tyler Breeze, capping off a wonderful showpiece match at the original Takeover event. So yes, Tyler Breeze versus Sami Zayn was the best undercard match of NXT Takeover, the first show.
NXT Takeover Fatal 4-Way.
Following that, we had NXT Takeover Fatal 4-Way. Now, this was the big test for the NXT brand as a whole, because the first event was a unique thing. It's like WrestleMania 1 for the main roster was this first thing. It worked, but the big test was, could they do it again? In the modern day, AEW has this issue because they had the original All-In event, and that sold out 10,000 very quickly, and that was a big deal. They now have Double or Nothing coming up to see if they can repeat the success, but that will also have the same caveat of it technically being a first, because this is the first AEW show. The big question will be is, can they repeat that success? And going back to 2014, NXT did that with NXT Takeover Fatal 4-Way. And again, with most of the early ones, it was held at Full Sail, September 11th, 2014. And the match that we've chosen as the best of the undercard matches here is Baron Corbin versus CJ Parker. Now, that may seem like an odd choice considering it was a squash. But first and foremost, why it's great is the total subversion of what we were expecting. It's hard to imagine now, but going back, similar to when Goldberg debuted, Baron Corbin got like the jobber entrance. No, he's already in the ring when we come back from like a pre-taped promo. So he's just in the ring, Baron Corbin. And his opponent was CJ Parker, who at that time was in his Save the World environmentalist phase. Similar to Daniel Bryan's current gimmick. He had one of the best signs, which is "We have no planet B," which was fantastic, because Triple H always had a plan B, but we don't have a planet B. And CJ Parker was in the midst of a storyline, he had an angle going on, he had the character development. Baron Corbin was just this big tattooed dude. However, the second the bell rang, Corbin just popped him in the mouth, brutal punch, end of days, boom, match done. It was the first end of days we'd ever seen. We'd never seen the move, so similar to when Brock first did the F5, everyone was like, oh my god, what was that? That was an amazing move, replay after replay of it. Squash match, he's out the door. Suddenly we have a new dominant force in NXT. And current Baron Corbin's a bit of a waste, and it's a wasted potential because we know what he can do. But this match just set the tone for everything. It also put CJ Parker in his place, because again, the character at that point was an annoying heel. And for us, Baron Corbin versus CJ Parker was the best undercard match from Fatal 4-Way. So if you haven't seen it, go and check it out. Take you 20 seconds.
NXT Takeover, Our Evolution.
Following that, we have NXT Takeover, Our Evolution. It's not revolution, it's Our Evolution. It was such a weird way of putting it. Again, this was from Full Sail, this was December 11th. So it's quite interesting that, for whatever reason, all of the takeover events have taken place on the 11th of the month. It's a really weird synergy there. I don't know if it was intentional. But we had Our Evolution, and our match, again, picking from there, is almost another glorified squash, and again it features CJ Parker. The debut of Kevin Owens versus CJ Parker. Unlike the previous entry, CJ was used as cannon fodder to help get over the next NXT Arrival. Unlike Corbin though, Kevin Owens came in with a lot of hype. He had a lot of hype vignettes building up that he was coming in. So it wasn't so much, obviously with this one we knew Kevin Owens was going to win, but that's not the point, it's to get a new guy in. CJ Parker did a brilliant job of getting it over, that he was tough, especially when he accidentally broke his nose. When he hit him with the third eye, which is the Shote Palm Strike. Kevin shattered his nose, it just added to the visual. And then Kevin Owens took over, decimated his opponent with power moves. Didn't use the package pile driver, because obviously pile drivers are a no-no in WWE for the most part. But did finish him off with a pop-up powerbomb, which was one of his moves from the Indies. Brutal, dominant showing for the new big bully on campus. Over with the crowd. Perfect work by CJ Parker and getting him over. Just brilliant match from beginning to end. Hot crowd. Obviously that led to the main event, which was a fantastic match as well, with Sami Zayn finally won the NXT title with one of the best in-ring storytelling moments you're ever likely to see. Sami Zayn picks up the title, but he's been doing it his way and always coming up short. Neville's trying to tell him that you need to take these shortcuts. He's saying, no, I don't. It's coming to the point, but he's always falling short. Neville comes in with the title belt, ready to smack Sami Zayn with it, but gets countered. The belt falls on the floor. The referee's down. Sami Zayn picks up the belt. The crowd are going ape, telling him to not cheat. Don't cheat. Don't compromise. Don't do it, Sami. You'll prove Neville right. You will compromise yourself. You will never be the same. Sami puts the belt down. The crowd cheer someone for not cheating, and then he wins the belt. Kevin Owens then comes out, first one to congratulate him. Storied friendship on the Indies. They're keeping that as they're in the WWE or NXT. Kevin Owens turns on him, pretty much straight away after they've hugged and everyone's left. And that was set up from the match earlier. I know I'm on a tangent there. That was set up from the match earlier where Kevin Owens came in as the conquering hero. Flipped this. He knew it was like all the indie guys are going to get cheered when they come in. So you have to do that and then have something to turn them. And ruining Sammy's moment was the perfect opportunity. So our pick for undercard match of Takeover Revolution is Kevin Owens versus CJ Parker. Check it out.
NXT Takeover Arrival.
The next show is NXT Takeover Arrival, which was again held at Full Sail on February the 11th, keeping the 11th of the month thing going again. And it was headlined by Kevin Owens versus Sami Zayn for the NXT Championship. And our pick for the undercard match was Finn Balor versus Adrian Neville, which was the finals of a tournament to crown a new #1 contender, obviously to challenge whoever wins the belt at the main event. Now, Balor had only debuted a few months prior, and he defeated Neville in what was, I would say, Neville's NXT swan song, because he was heading up to the main roster not long after this. So it's like a passing of the torch of sorts. Between two guys who obviously knew each other very well from the Indies in Japan. It was a 30-minute barn burner of a bout, ensuring the early NXT legacy would continue in good hands, because to that point, easily, and even now it's arguable until Ciampa's run, Neville was the best NXT champion they had. Great matches, long-term, storyline booking all the way through. So that was the legacy, and would that legacy continue? Because by this point we're starting to see people getting called up to the main roster from NXT, so the people are getting replaced. And Neville was the biggest name outside Seth Rollins, arguably, obviously, but from the people who were in NXT for the long time, Neville was your guy, and then he was going up, so it was to see if the promotion would stay, the brand, would stay in safe hands. The match between him and him and Finn Balor ensured that. It was a great match, the right guy won, and it led into other things down the line. So, yeah, on this one, NXT Takeover Arrival, the main event is the best match of the show, but this is the best of the undercard matches, and if you're new to NXT, this is a good barometer to go back and watch the early stuff. See the evolution of NXT, what it was back then. NXT, as we know, started in 2012, which is crazy, it's been going 7 years now. It's evolved so much, but it's always had good wrestling, and this was a great wrestling match. So that was Takeover Arrival, Finn Balor versus Adrian Neville, #1 contenders.
NXT Takeover Unstoppable.
The next show is NXT Unstoppable. It was the last of the original run of Full Sail NXT takeovers, and in this one, this was May 20th, so they've also broken the 11th of the month streak they had going on. And our pick for the best match on the undercard is Sasha Banks versus Becky Lynch for the NXT Women's Championship. Now, these are two of the 4 horsewomen of NXT. There's been Charlotte and Bayley. And this match, basically, they were the backbone of the women's division on the brand. They had excellent matches between each other, teaming with each other, various shows, various combinations. But this match, this was Becky Lynch's coming out party. Basically, she debuted, I don't even know where they were thinking with this. She debuted as a stereotypical Irish dancer. She was even doing the river dance type thing in the ring. And people thought it was a joke. At the time, people thought it was genuinely meant to be a joke. But then she turned heel on Bayley, as everyone did back then, aligned herself with Sasha Banks, but then she obviously had a title match here, and she was being overlooked in comparison to the other four horsewomen, including some of the other women on the roster at the time as well. And this match, it was back and forth. Basically, they went at it for 15 minutes until Sasha won by submission. It was big moves, big throws, trading submission holds. And it was such a great effort by Becky Lynch that she lost. She did lose. Sasha sashayed up the ramp, gloating as only the boss could in her victory. And Becky Lynch was in the ring, almost in tears, crying that she came so close. She came this close to becoming the NXT Women's Champion. And in an amazing show of support from the Full Sail crowd. And while they can be really annoying and up their own behinds at times, when the Full Sail crowd get it right, there's no better crowd to be in front of. And they started singing Becky Lynch's theme tune completely unprompted. It didn't even come on. They just started singing it as a show of respect to Becky Lynch. And this, it's a way of telling the people in the back that we accept this person. We believe in this person. Please push this person. We wish to see more of her. And that's what happened there. Becky Lynch used that as the catalyst to push forward everything else, to change and tweak her character, until becoming the man she is today. So yeah, Sasha Banks versus Becky Lynch, it's a phenomenal match. The women in NXT, especially this time, but the women in NXT have always been really good. They've always had really a good core to the women's division, going back to even Paige and Emma back in the day when it first started. And looking at it now with like Shayna Baszler and Dakota Kai, Io Shirai, Kairi Sane, Bianca Belair, they've got such a good core group of women that the matches are always good. And this was Becky Lynch's, to this point, this was Becky Lynch's best match in NXT. Arguably, maybe even the best women's match in NXT to this point. But as we're about to find out, that didn't last for long.
NXT Takeover Brooklyn.
And so, we reach the first of the takeovers away from Full Sail. And boy did they go big and go quick, escalated quickly as the men would say. From 400, the Full Sail attendance, to Brooklyn in front of 15,589 people on August 22nd, the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York, 2015. This was the weekend of SummerSlam, and it started the tradition of NXT takeovers being on the Saturday night before the big Sunday night pay-per-views. So that's why we have a Rumble takeover, we have a WrestleMania takeover, generally in the same city, rarely in the same building, but the SummerSlam weekend was unique because we would have takeover in the Barclays Center for the last couple of years, last 4 years. We'd have takeover at the Barclays Center, we'd then have SummerSlam at the Barclays Center, then we'd have Raw and SmackDown on the Monday and Tuesday after. So it was 4 nights in one building, selling out each night for the most part. And with this one, the undercard match to this one, again, is Sasha Banks defending the NXT Women's Championship, this time against Bayley. And why this one is great is not just the match was phenomenal, the match was amazing, but it was the story going into the match. See, with regards to this, Bayley had been betrayed by Charlotte, she'd been betrayed by Sasha, and she'd been betrayed by Becky Lynch over the last year. And it all turned heel on her. And she'd try and get revenge. She'd always come up short in the matches against Charlotte, Becky, and Sasha. For whatever reason, but she would always come up short. And the other ones were trying to tell her, look, you're too soft, you're too nice, this is why you're not doing well. and she wouldn't turn. Bayley, the character, especially then, is why it hurts sometimes when they go to the main roster fully formed, because NXT we grew with Bayley to this point, whereas in NXT she already was this with no growth for the fans to latch onto. But she started her redemption tour by defeating Becky Lynch. She then fought and finally defeated Charlotte, who gave her a massive show of respect after the match, leading her to finally facing, like a video game, she's facing the boss to win it all. The biggest takeover event ever to this point, in Brooklyn, New York, in front of 15,000 people. And this match was phenomenal. The event was phenomenal. Leading up to it, also, the main event was Kevin Owens versus Finn Balor for the NXT Championship in a ladder match, where Finn came out as a demon. We all know how that went, because Kevin Owens had already Kevin Owens was already on the main roster. He'd done his open challenge response to Cena, and he'd already defeated Cena on the main roster. So, but during that, because this was the first one outside of Full Sail, when the wrestlers were hyping up their matches, they would mention that in Brooklyn, and the crowd would boo. Kevin Owens then did, it was a shoot, because it was completely reactionary to, it was within character and it kept within the structure of his promo, but it was a total shoot. He mentioned what was going to happen in the ladder match at Brooklyn, the crowd booed, and he said I'm going to take a moment to address this, and he nuked. I'll put a link to the promo in the description below, because you need to see it. It's phenomenal. And he nuked the Full Sail crowd for being elitist, and it was amazing work. It was stunning. The show itself, including that ladder match, also featured Jushin Thunder Liger fighting Tyler Breeze in Liger's only match in WWE ever, and now he's retired, so that's it. It will be his only match ever. But that was it was amazing that they could do that. NXT had a little run where people would just come in for a couple of matches from other promotions. Like the Wolves, Davey Richards and Eddie Edwards came in. They had a match. James Storm came in for a couple of matches. Eric Young came in for a couple of matches before he actually got hired. And people would just come in, have a couple of matches and go again. And it was amazing. And the biggest of that was Jushin Liger. He had a great opening match with Tyler Breeze in front of a large crowd. It was so unexpected. It was so great. But I digress. The best match on the night, this is the match of the night. And it was the match that cemented, for me, for Josh as well, it cemented what NXT could be. It's not overstating things to say that this is the match which put Takeover on the map as it relates to being a huge event worthy of selling out arenas, 10,000 plus seater buildings. The match was back and forth, there was near falls, there was submission attempts, there was reverse submission attempts, there was fantastic heel work by Sasha, trapping Bayley's hand in the ring steps and kicking the steps to hurt her hand. She had her in a submission hold, the bank statement, Bayley's reaching for the ropes, Sasha starts stamping on her hand. It was brutal. They pulled the stops out, there were so many near falls, like I said, so many close calls. And then there's comebacks leading to Bayley hitting a top rope Poison Rana to Sasha Banks that she just rotated over in. That was phenomenal. That popped the crowd like nothing else. Even Liger being there didn't pop the crowd like this move. From there, Bayley cinched her hair tight, hit the belly to belly, and Sasha takes that move better than anyone. She hit the belly to belly. 1, 2, 3. Brand new NXT Women's Champion. Demons slayed. Not Finn, her own demons slayed. She was the champion. She had defeated the boss. And the culmination of that storyline reached the result we all wanted. Paige won the first tournament to be the first NXT champion, and like her and Emma, and that started the women's revolution. This match made the women's revolution. Sasha Banks versus Bayley in Brooklyn at the first NXT Takeover Brooklyn is why we had a full-blown NXT Women's Revolution and why it worked. I can't overstate enough how important this match was, and again, like I said before, I'm going to say this for all the matches. If you haven't seen them yet, go back and watch them. If you're new to NXT, go back and watch the takeovers. It's a bit much to watch all the TV shows, though I'd recommend you do that as well. But go back and watch the takeovers and watch the show evolve. But yeah, to this point, Sasha Banks versus Bayley is possibly the best match NXT have had. I don't think that's an overstatement either. So yeah, I'm rambling a bit. Sasha Banks, Bayley, Brooklyn. Go see it. Go on, go.
NXT Takeover Respect.
Going back to Full Sail in October 7th of 2015, it is NXT Takeover Respect, which was headlined by a rematch between Sasha Banks and Bayley in an Iron Woman match, which actually eclipsed their previous match at NXT Takeover Brooklyn. However, it's the main event of this match. It was the first time the women had main evented the show as well, so it's disqualified from inclusion here. So the best match of the undercard here is Finn Balor and Samoa Joe versus Baron Corbin and Rhino in the finals of the first ever Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic. There were some issues at the time. It was two singles guys put together in teams, beat all the other actual teams, but in hindsight, it was the best result. Finn Balor and Samoa Joe, they'd kind of got together for mutual respect, and as did Baron Corbin and Rhino. Rhino had just come back because Corbin was running through everyone, and it was the first real test that Baron Corbin had. So they had a mutual respect going on as well, so they decided to team up. However, I would say this was a bit of a come down because obviously we're back at Full Sail, which was the first event away from home. It was a litmus test to see if they could run shows away from Full Sail in larger arenas. So coming back to Full Sail, while it's their home, it's a bit of a letdown, or a letdown's wrong. It's a bit of a come down from that high. But then sometimes you can't go bigger straight away. You have to do the big, then you come back, and then you do big again. However, I would argue that this is the weakest takeover so far. The weakest takeover of all time. A great main event, don't get me wrong. It was headlined, as I said, by the blistering Iron Man match between Sasha and Bayley. We had the debut of Apollo Crews, along with the conclusion to the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic, because the semi-finals and the finals were on the same night. Finn Balor had a little bit of an injury angle coming into the main event. Him and Joe were the Dream Team taking on Rhino and Corbin, who were just the dominating bruisers, which NXT seems to have. They have that one team of just crushing people, or they have one guy who's a dominating person all the time. So it was 10 minutes of good action. Ended with Finn Balor hitting the coup de grace after Joe had hit the muscle buster on Rhino, got the victory, and the winners of the first Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic, etching their name on the trophy, was Samoa Joe and Finn Balor. Like I said, it was the weakest of the takeovers. This was the best match on the undercard. It is what it is.
NXT Takeover London.
NXT Takeover London is a special event, as it's the first takeover outside of North America, and it's the second takeover away from Full Sail. We're now in the UK at the SSE Arena in London. It's December 2015, just over 10,000 people in the building, and with this one, the main event was Finn Balor defending the NXT Championship dressed as Jack the Ripper Demon, but on the undercard we're starting to see the formation of what for me has always been NXT strength, which is its tag team division. The women's division was in good hands. Now the tag team division was getting there as well. And the match, it's for the NXT Tag Team Championships. It's Dash and Dawson versus Enzo and Cass. And like I say, it's the second takeover to be held outside of Full Sail and the first to be held overseas. And while they've not got the Revival name yet. They used to be the Mechanics, they've moved on from that, but they're not the Revival yet. The awesome tag team work is in effect. Everything is in place. And basically, they're going against arguably the most over tag team in NXT history. Definitely the most over team to never win the titles. Maybe like other teams were more over in the moment, but overall, Enzo and Cass were possibly the most over act in NXT. Chanting along, good synergy. They weren't the best wrestlers in the world, but the dynamic they had just worked. And this had some amazing action, some awesome near falls. Dash and Dawson continuing their revival of tag team wrestling, basically by bringing back what had already been, what's old is new again. And there were some good tag teams before them, including the Ascension, Blake and Murphy, and the Wyatt family. But it was these two throwbacks basically who dragged tag team wrestling back into the spotlight, where it belongs. Huge fan of tag team wrestling. Where it belongs. They had a great match and an awesome finish with a top rope sharp machine to Enzo, which, while it deflated the crowd immediately, because again Enzo and Cass were super over, you couldn't help but be amazed and happy about how good the tag team matches were. So pre-crisis Revival, Dash and Dawson versus Enzo and Cass were the best undercard match of NXT Takeover London.
NXT Takeover Dallas.
We move on, it's now April 2016, it's WrestleMania weekend, and it's NXT Takeover Dallas. Finn Balor is main eventing again, this time as a Texas Chainsaw Massacre inspired demon from his Jack the Ripper one before. And this was a great show, but the best match on the card, and obviously the best of the undercard matches, was Shinsuke Nakamura versus Sami Zayn. Just saying those names, if you're a follower of NXT at all, you'd know why that isn't a surprise. The hype coming in was amazing. Sami Zayn was getting ready to go to the main roster, and there was kind of like, Sami Zayn didn't have a match for TakeOver, so William Regal, general manager at the time, said, I want to give you a great match. No storylines, nothing, and it was against this man, and he pointed to the Tron. And that one was Shinsuke Nakamura. Crowd go apoplectic. Sami Zayn has a big grin on his face, Regal has a big grin on his face, and then the hype builds to this takeover. Nakamura's debut. Now Nakamura, huge name in Japan, insanely charismatic, very unique style, super over in his home country, so his debut in NXT was eagerly looked forward to by pretty much everyone. In Sami Zayn, he had the perfect opponent to let the match to be just about the in-ring action. No shenanigans, no storylines, just two guys going at it. And it started, Sami Zayn comes out, and then we get Nakamura's entrance. Now, we've obviously seen it so many times now, but going back to watching that first entrance, I watched it about a dozen times the next day. It was so amazing. The music, the opening, the Tron, the graphics, the lights, Nakamura himself, everything was perfect. And that theme was just ungodly cool. And then we get to the match in the ring. Nakamura's got the people in out of his hands, he hasn't even touched anyone yet. Then we get 20 plus minutes of just magic. Two masters at their craft. Winner was never in doubt. Sami's obviously leaving, Nakamura's the new guy coming in. Although they have subverted that a little bit in more recent times, but there's no way Nakamura was losing this. The match was phenomenal, near falls, amazing action, brutal strikes, and the debut of the Kinshasa. It's the same as the Bomaye, but can't use that just because of what my means. So we've renamed the Kinshasa in honour of the same thing. It's to do with Muhammad Ali, Rumble in the Jungle. And the new hero of NXT had arrived in the shape of Shinsuke Nakamura. And because again, like we've touched on before, NXT is still a developmental territory. That's where it is. It's so much more than that, but it's still a place where people wrestle and then move on. No one's there for the long haul. Like Orton got a promo the weekend on during the week, on SmackDown, where he'd been in WWE since 2002, so that's 17 years. You're not going to get that in NXT because it's a breeding ground to make people ready for the main roster. Although I do believe that the brand extension, when they do the superstar swaps, should have people going back to NXT. I'd love to see Tyler Breeze back in NXT. I know he had a one-shot a couple of months ago, but yeah, people should be able to move freely. There should be 3 independent brands. Yeah, the goal is to get to the main roster, get more money, hit the bigger pay-per-views. But some people would do with a rehabilitation of going back down to NXT. But again, I'm digressing. That's a story for another time. This is the story of Shinsuke Nakamura making his debut in NXT and winning the hearts of everyone. Again, if you haven't seen it, please go and do so. I'll still be here when you come back.
NXT Takeover, the end.
Up next is NXT Takeover, the end. Now this caused a lot of confusion at the beginning because it was rumoured that it was the last takeover. That's why it's called the end. Or it would be the last show they did in Full Sail. Now neither of those things have came true. Full Sail is still the home base. Obviously we've still had takeovers. So it was changed to the end of the line. It was a bit of confusion, but we'll just call it the end. We're back in Full Sail. It's June 8th, 2016. And for us, and again, this is tag team stuff again, so you better get used to it. The match of the undercard is the American Alpha versus the Revival. And the reason this is great is basically American Alpha are another example of how NXT just seemed to do simple things right that mean so much more overall. So much, for some reason I don't understand. NXT can do all of these great things. There has never been a bad takeover. Obviously there's been some that have not been as good as others. But since 2014 there has never been a bad NXT takeover. You cannot say the same about the main roster. And for whatever reason, NXT TV, there's rarely a bad episode of NXT TV. And again, you can't say that for the main roster. And it's baffling as to why. Because it's the same company. And it's got to be how the shows are produced and written. It must be. And it's going to be interesting when... Because obviously Triple H is the mastermind behind NXT, so he's kind of like the boss there, and it's ultimately his vision. When Vince does this eventually go, will it change? Will the main roster change to be more like NXT, just on a bigger scale? But for now, even today, NXT just seems to do simple things that work. And with American Alpha, that's what they have. Jason Jordan had been teaming with Ty Dillinger for quite a bit of time, but then that team broke up. And he was looking for some tag team partners. And he's trying out new people to be his tag team partner week on week, month on month, while Chad Gable is nipping at his heels, basically saying, "Look, pick me, and he won't. But eventually, he's like, all of these people are failing, I may as well have one more failure, so he picks Chad Gable. And for anyone who doesn't know Chad Gable is like Kurt Angle shrunk in the wash. That's what he's like. He's a bit smaller than Kurt Angle. He's also an Olympic wrestler. He's quick, he's agile, he can do some high flying stuff. He just gets pro wrestling as a character and as an in-ring performer. And him and Jason Jordan together just clicked. There was just something about them that just worked. And the team just started building and building and building and building. And then we get the American Alpha winning the tag belts from the Revival in a brilliant sequence. So this is the rematch. It's American Alpha defending the NXT Tag Team Championships against the Revival, who are obviously now known as the Revival, who, as we touched on, have been revolutionising tag team wrestling in the US, and they are, for me, they are the best tag team in the world. Even now, even though they're not being used properly, they are the best tag team at tag team wrestling. For me, they're the best tag team in the world. They may not have the flashiest of double team moves or single team moves. They may not have the zippiest outfits or the catchiest of theme songs or the most eye-catching of looks. But for pure tag team psychology, there is not a better team in the world than the Revival. And going by this, because obviously this was in 2016, June 2016, they've been the best for coming up for 3-4 years now. And together with American Alpha, it's just magic. 16 minutes of just action, tag team, double team, psychology, the works. And it leads up to the Revival becoming the first two-time tag team champions. Like we say, rare for people to win the belt more than once in NXT because normally they get called up. While American Alpha immediately moved on to their next feud because the Revival won the belts, did their celebrations and left. American Alpha stayed in the ring to get the standing ovation from the crowd, the well done, that was amazing even though you lost ovation, only to be attacked by who we would then later come to know as the Authors of Pain. Again, this is another destructive team. NXT does this so well, and they get absolutely obliterated. And now we have a new feud. The Revival can move on to something else, and American Alpha have got their next feud against the Authors of Pain before they themselves end up in the main roster. And we don't talk about that because what happened to American Alpha in the main roster is it's a crime. How can you have a tag team like this and just ruin it? NXT call-ups, especially in the tag team ranks, are abysmal. But that one hurt. At least the Revival are still together and are now champions. But yeah, go back to then, June 2016, and just watch two teams of masters at work crafting a iconic tag team storyline. And for it being the final takeover at Full Sail, and to date it is the last takeover they ever did at Full Sail, it was a very fitting way to go out.
NXT Takeover Brooklyn 2.
Now, if you cast your mind back to earlier in the video, I mentioned that Brooklyn, NXT Takeover Brooklyn 1 in 2015 was the first event away from Full Sail. It was the first time they were testing the water to see if they could do big business in a large arena, and they did. It's August 2016, and we're back at Barclays Center in Brooklyn for NXT Takeover Brooklyn 2. Again, it's Takeover, SummerSlam, Raw and SmackDown, so it's a 4-night event overall. And this one was just an amazing show again. And it's interesting that the takeover seem to always overshadow the WWE pay-per-views that follow them, which must give Triple H a great sense of pride. And on this one again, it's a tag team title match as the Revival defend against DIY, who, especially at this point, are the best tag teams in the world. At this time in 2016, there is no one who can touch them. They're just putting on amazing matches after amazing matches, and it's an evolution of what came before. So you'd have a match, then you'd have a match that would counter some things that worked in the previous match, then you'd have a match which would counter the counters to what worked in the previous match, and so on and so on. So we end up here now. It's Brooklyn, and it's the Revival defending against DIY, which is Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano, and the crowd are just up for it from the beginning till the end. Tag team double team moves, amazing sequences, saves, last split second breakup of pins, double team moves, and then the Revival chop block Johnny Gargano's leg and just go to town on it. They just wail on this leg, and then Gargano, they get their comeback and so on and so on, but then Ciampa is taken out. The lock in an inverted figure 4, the damage to Johnny's leg is too much, he has to tap. The Revival retain their belts. Johnny Gargano apologising while in pain to his partner for being the weak link. And it's just phenomenal work. It just works. Everything about it works. The crowd, it's rare for a performer to elicit a genuine emotional response from the crowd of unmitigated sympathy. It's easy to get someone to boo you. Cheap heat is called cheap heat for a reason. Cheap pops are called cheap pops for a reason. It's another thing entirely to get them emotionally invested without saying a word to them. And it's a genuine reaction from the crowd that Johnny's lost. They are heartbroken for him. And it's a wonderful advert for what wrestling, tag team wrestling especially, can be in the modern era. And if you look around the world now, tag team wrestling is back in a big way. And I want to say it's because of these teams at this time just putting on these amazing tag team wrestling matches in front of the world. I'm not saying there wasn't other great tag teams, especially in other promotions at the time, but this gave tag team wrestling a focal point it had not had in a long time. So, as you can probably guess, the Revival and DIY are going to feature in this list a lot for the next couple of shows. But Takeover Brooklyn 2 was the first big match between the two, and it's just amazing. So, just go and watch it. I know I've said that for other matches before, but you should just be going to watch matches like this on the regular anyway. So yeah, Brooklyn 2. Another defining match. Brooklyn 1 was defined by the Sasha Bayley match, making the Women's Revolution a viable thing. This was pinnacle of the show was the tag team title match, doing the exact same thing for tag team wrestling.
NXT Takeover Toronto.
Now we're heading up to Canada for NXT Takeover Toronto, the second takeover to take place outside of the US, still in North America though, but we're in Canada now. And this one, the best undercard match here is again the Revival versus DIY for the NXT Tag Team Championships. However, this time, the previous match was so good, the storyline was so good, so we're doing it again, but it's 2 out of 3 falls. Now in Canada, the Revival, the heels, have got some Heart Foundation inspired gear on. DIY, vaguely the Rockers inspired gear, even though they're just trunks. So we're off to the races there already. And that sets the mood for the match. And one of the big good things about this match was that while it is a 2 out of 3 falls match, each of the falls felt like a full proper match in its own right. There was, like, they got some good time between the falls, because too often in these 2 out of 3 falls match you get bang bang, fall, and that's just to get 2 falls out of the way, so we're getting 1 match over the 3 falls. Rarely do you get a clean sweep in these type of matches, although it has happened. MVP Chris Benoit was a clean sweep, surprisingly for MVP on that one. But this match is just phenomenal. And the Revival pick up the first fall, countering Johnny's slingshot spear straight into a shower machine. Beautifully done. While DIY take the second with their meet in the middle. Running kick to the face, kick to the face, to a downed opponent in the middle of the ring, hence the name. So each have won with their main double team finisher, and we're 1 fall apiece, going into the final. And it's thrilling. It's a thrilling final fall. Again, near falls aplenty, saves, people coming seemingly out of nowhere to save their partner. Just unbelievable kickouts, false finishes. And then Johnny Gargano gets locked in the same inverted figure 4 that he tapped out to in Toronto, in Brooklyn. And the crowd are going absolutely crazy for Johnny not to give up this time. And he doesn't. And we end up coming back in, the match goes around a bit, and then we end up having Dash and Dawson locked in the respective finishers of Gargano and Ciampa. The Gargano escape and Ciampa's flip over Fujiwara armbar. We get the great visual of Dash and Dawson holding hands, trying to will the other one not to tap out, even though if Scott Dawson taps out, it doesn't matter, he's not a legal man, but it's the visual representation of it. And then finally they both tap at the same time. The Revival are lost the tag team titles. DIY have finally made it to the top. They are the tag team champions, and it was the best match on the card by a mile, and it was the best NXT match of the entire year of 2016. Nothing came close to it. And for me, as I said, lover of tag team wrestling, this is tag team wrestling. Anyone who's training to be a wrestler, everyone who's just starting out to be a wrestler, who is in a tag team, should watch this match and learn everything they can. Watch as many Revival matches as you can, watch as many matches against DIY, all of those. Pick up everything because they are master classes in what makes good tag team wrestling work. And that brings us to the end of part 1 of this 2-part series. Join us in the next video for part 2, where we round out our list of the best undercard matches for each takeover. See you soon. Goodbye.